But there was a problem. Tricky bits of glass were usually sold by con men. Charlatan is an Italian word. It means, or at least it originally meant, the guys who got up on a platform in the middle of the piazza and sold you snake oil, weird stuff, things to cure syphilis, and things to make women fall in love with you. And in between this charming, rather bizarre, but definitely financial game, they'd show you machines, tricks, bits of glass. They'd show you glass that made things coloured. It was called the science of miracles. What Galileo had to do was to exploit what the charmers were doing and then make sure that no one mistook him for one. Despite its tawdry reputation, Galileo was convinced the spyglass could make him a fast ducat. He realized that an instrument that could make distant bodies appear very nearby could be much more than just a toy. For a military and commercial power like Venice, it could be invaluable. The Venetian navy could see its enemies hours before they arrived, and traders could spot goods that were coming into port and adjust their prices accordingly. And of course, Galileo himself could rake it in. Galileo at once got hold of some good lenses from his local glassworks, and he took them away to test, to play with. The result of Galileo's games with these lenses would change astronomy forever. Now, Galileo set about making a better spyglass than the existing one. The spyglass showed things upside down, and it could only magnify 2 or 3 times. But what Galileo did was to use a very strong concave lens, which he put near his eye, and then at a determined distance further off, along the tube, a convex lens. Now, with that arrangement, Galileo's device could show things the right way up, and it showed them magnified 8 or 9 times. Galileo's telescope was a technical marvel. He was convinced he would make his fortune by selling it to the Venetian government. But first, he had to convince them he wasn't a charlatan. So he would bring skeptics up here to the top of a bell tower in Venice and show them the familiar sights of the city. And then he'd get them to look through the telescope and agree that it just did magnify and that it could be trusted. What he was setting out to do was to get people to accept that light traveling through a telescope was a reliable carrier of information. Finally, the Venetian government were persuaded that it wasn't just a trick, and they accepted Galileo's offer and rewarded him handsomely. Galileo was extremely cunning in dealing with the Venetian government. In exchange for offering them a monopoly over the manufacture of his new spyglasses, he wanted a serious salary increase. And he got it. Unfortunately, the very next day, he was found out. The government discovered that spyglasses sold by charlatans in the markets of Venice, though not as good, were a lot cheaper than Galileo's, and they refused to increase his salary ever again. But now Galileo had what he needed, some money, and more importantly, a tool to manipulate light, the telescope. Here, the balcony of his house, Galileo turned his telescope to the skies for the first time. What he saw amazed him. He saw a world that people had never dreamt could possibly exist. Over the next few months, he became obsessed by what he could see on the surface of the moon. It was rugged, It had craters and mountains. He even managed to measure the height of some of the mountains. They were 4 miles high. He saw far more stars than you can see with the naked eye. Nobody had ever seen these things before. The telescope revealed a universe far bigger and more complex than anyone had ever imagined. Galileo worked hard to publish his findings just as soon as he could. He quickly released a book called The Stellar Messenger. Now, the book was an absolute revelation. Although the public read it avidly, they found it disturbing and confusing. It showed hundreds of stars invisible to the naked eye. It showed mountains on the moon, craters and seas. It showed stars never before imagined. The whole universe seemed to be in flux. And all this because of a simple telescope. But hidden in the starry messenger was the most explosive of all Galileo's observations. These tiny sketches would ignite one of the greatest controversies in the history of the Christian Church. They refer to observations he started on the 10th of June, 1610, the night he trained his telescope on the planet Jupiter. He saw 3 and then 4 moons orbiting round the planet. This would shake the worldview that had held sway for over 500 years. Throughout the ages, people had considered themselves to be special, to hold a pivotal position on Earth. After all, the book of Genesis said that God made man in his own image and placed him on Earth, at the center of the universe.